we are going to discuss Ryanair, of course, the biggest strike of all time today, Eoghan. Nearly 400 flights, more than 50,000 passengers affected. And to make matters worse, the pilot strikes here in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Sweden and in Belgium are for a variety of different reasons. Eoghan, of course, you're editor of Travel Extra. First of all, can we talk us through why this is happening today and why 5 countries?
It does seem to be a little bit of watching what each other are doing. This was something that, hasn't been happening until now. What the core of the problem, and to be clear, Krista, the risk of stating the blindingly obvious to the listeners, it goes back to, if you remember, Henry Kissinger saying, if you want to talk to Europe, who do you phone? If you want to talk to Europe's unions, who do you actually phone? Ryanair is dealing with 5 different countries, 8 different unions. They're in 37 markets. What we've seen with the pilots, they are in the position of supreme power compared with all the other parts of the equation. When Ryanair ran into a rostering problem in September, it was the moment they've waited for 2 decades, and all the different. There will be a league table of some be a little bit more belligerent, the others some more amenable than the others. But from where I'm looking, just to analyse what's happened since then, Ryanair is really dependent on 3 markets. It's unique in aviation history that it's spread across 37 countries, but there are 3 that matters. It carries more than 20 million passengers in Britain and in Spain and in Italy. A lot of the early recognition we saw was squaring off those markets, putting the fire out there. The British signed up in January, the Italians in February. Actually, there was there was a deal done in Ireland as well with the CAE Park aviation pilots in February as well. They signed a recognition agreement. Some people will be confused by the fact that IALPA is only 95 of the 350 pilots, but a lot of them are recognised under a different sort of agreement. But all the time, there was clear that IALPA were going to be slow to the table because, historically they've been closest to Ryanair. They've been staring at each other for a long, long time. And the Germans were going to be slower to the table. Vereinigung Cockpit would historically have cited the Ryanair model as a threat to the very way pilots negotiate with airlines across Europe.
And of course, Forsa were very clear, speaking to us last week on the programme, that the strikes are not orchestrated across Europe. But I was listening this morning to Jim Phillips on Morning Ireland, and he is obviously head of the union there and the German pilots. He was saying he wouldn't be surprised if they had further strikes. Do you think that dispute could be heating up?
Without a doubt, Miriam. We're not even at the first round of the match here, the boxing match here. We're still at the weigh-in. They're actually working out how much power they have, how much of an impact a strike can cause. Now, the markets that are striking aren't tremendously big by Ryanair standards. It's bolstered the confidence of the airline that they can fly through it. You're dealing with cancellations of about a dozen flights in each direction from Ireland, and the same with Scandinavia. Now it's bigger with the Belgian, the Dutch and the Germans. The German is really significant, Miriam. That's where Ryanair is plotting its growth. It's not a big market yet, but it wants to be a 20 million carrier there. And this is the obstinacy or the opposition of the trade union is going to be a big factor in that. So it's pretty important. If you're looking at people to sit down and iron out the deal with, Vereinigung Cockpit is going to probably be the number one of the when Ilya Schulz, the previous president of Vereinigung, lobbied very heavily to the German parliament. He spent his entire presentation almost on Ryanair, and the predecessor also, who rejoices. If you're going to be head up a pilots union, you have a terrific name, Winfried Streicher. But Winfried Streicher and Ilya and Martin Locher, a lot of the rhetoric we've heard from them in the last 10 years has been specifically directed at Ryanair. So this is a big problem looming, won't go away. Ryanair's going to confront those German pilots. The rest, probably, you'll get around, negotiating. But it's quite clear they're feeling how much power they have, how much damage they can do, as our local pilots. And this will continue until they have a fair idea of what their power is and bringing that as a bargaining chip to the table.
Now, in terms of passengers, even people listening, I mean, for people flying with Ryanair today, Eoghan, who have not been contacted by the airline, does that mean their flight's okay?
Yes, anybody who hasn't been contacted, their flight is okay. Ryanair have great faith in their data. They've really worked really hard on the app, and they have email contacts and they've text contacts. They will tell you it's working very well. Of course, Miriam, whoever designed the app has never met my Auntie May. There's going to be a couple of people out there who are going to show up at the airport and find the flight is not on the board. Ryanair are unusual. A lot of airlines will keep the flights on the departures board while the negotiations are going through, and that can happen even in the night. We've seen it with Aer Lingus right up to the night before. Ryanair's approach has thrown the unions a little bit because it's a little bit different. Even when they're negotiating, they've already cancelled the flights. There's a reason for this. Ryanair aren't based in one country, as is quite clear. They're going to be flying W patterns. The aircraft is going to take off, go to Milan from Dublin, go on to Barcelona, go to Dusseldorf. Punctuality is king. That's why they panicked in September when the punctuality started to slip, and they are quick to cancel the flights. That has thrown it's a different way of doing things, and it's actually thrown the whole compensation regime and the unions into a bit of how do we cope with this? It's the way Ryanair operate, and that's another thing that the different trade unions across Europe are going to have to grapple with. And I'm not sure that process has evolved yet. And the sad thing is there will be more strike threats than there are actual flight cancellations while that evolution is taking place, because a strike threat means forward bookings are affected, confidence is affected, people get stressed and they start looking at other brands.
And Ryanair actually sent a statement to this programme this morning saying 396 flights have been cancelled. We're talking about today, obviously, and all affected customers have been notified. Over 90% have all been reaccommodated or refunded on other flights. But then it goes on to say there will be a number of customers who have not taken any action yet. That appears to leave about 10% of these customers, which would be about 5,000 people actually, Eoghan, who for some reason have not taken a different flight or a refund. Why would that be?
I would expect people to disappear into the ether. I wouldn't expect 5,000. I'd expect about maybe 500. A lot of people book more than one flight. I do it myself when I'm not sure of when a connecting flight is landing or a meeting might end, and you don't actually take it up. So there will be people who the flight not taking off won't affect them in any way. The interesting thing is that one of the things that Ryanair was heavily criticised for during the snow in February was that the call centre, both Aer Lingus and Ryanair were heavily criticised that the call centre were inadequately manned to answer the phone. They've beefed up the call centres, and my information from Ryanair is that the number of phone contacts is below what they expected, because as they will hand this up, the app, texting, the email, all of that is so successful. There will be people who disappear into the ether, but the question really is, are people showing up today for a flight that doesn't exist? It hasn't been happening with the IALPA action in Dublin, but then the German, Belgian and Scandinavian markets might be operating in a different way and at a different pace. OK,
Eoghan Corry, editor of Travel Extra. Thanks so much for coming in. We'll take a break.
Today with Miriam on RTE Radio 1.